What if I told you that your intelligence might actually be the very thing holding you back from success? I know that sounds completely backwards, but stick with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to share could completely change how you think about achievement and why some of the smartest people you know are still struggling, while others with half their IQ are crushing it in life. Here's something that will blow your mind. Studies show that beyond an IQ of about 120, which is just above average, additional intelligence has almost zero correlation with real-world success. Zero. That means the person with an IQ of 130 isn't statistically more likely to be successful than someone with an IQ of 120. But here's the kicker. They're often less successful because they fall into what I call the intelligence trap. You see, when you're smart, you get used to being right. You get used to having the answers. You get praised for your quick thinking and your ability to solve complex problems. But here's what nobody tells you. The skills that make you smart in school are completely different from the skills that make you successful in life. Think about it. In school, there's always a right answer. The teacher asks a question. You provide the correct response. You get rewarded. The system is predictable. But in the real world, there are no teachers giving you problems with predetermined solutions. There are no study guides. Most of the time, you're not even sure what the right question is, let alone the answer. This creates a massive problem for intelligent people. They become paralyzed by the complexity of real-world decisions. While someone with average intelligence might say, "Good enough," and take action, the smart person is still analyzing 17 different variables and considering every possible outcome. They're trapped in what psychologists call analysis paralysis. But it gets worse. Intelligent people often develop what I call the complexity addiction. They believe that because they can understand complex ideas, the solutions to their problems must also be complex. They overcomplicate everything. They create elaborate business plans when a simple one would work better. They research for months when they should be testing and iterating. They mistake complexity for sophistication. Here's a perfect example. I know a brilliant engineer who spent 2 years developing the perfect app. He analyzed market trends, studied user behavior patterns, created detailed wireframes, and built comprehensive technical specifications. Meanwhile, his college roommate, who barely graduated, threw together a simple productivity app in 3 weeks, launched it, got feedback from users, and iterated rapidly. Guess whose app is making 6 figures a year now? The smart engineer fell victim to what I call perfectionist procrastination. He needed everything to be perfect before he could move forward. But perfectionism isn't actually about high standards. It's about fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being as smart as everyone thinks you are. This brings us to another major trap, the identity prison. When you're labeled as the smart one from an early age, your entire identity becomes wrapped up in being intelligent. You start to believe that your worth comes from being right, from having the answers, from being the person others turn to for solutions. But this creates enormous pressure to never be wrong, never fail, never look foolish. So instead of taking calculated risks that could lead to massive success, intelligent people often choose safe paths that guarantee they won't fail publicly. They take the prestigious job at the established company instead of starting their own business. They stick with what they know instead of venturing into unfamiliar territory where they might not immediately excel. Meanwhile, less intelligent but more successful people are failing fast and failing often. They're learning from each failure and adjusting their approach. They're building what psychologists call a growth mindset, while the intelligent person is stuck in a fixed mindset, trying to protect their image as someone who doesn't make mistakes. Here's another crucial difference. Smart people tend to rely too heavily on their cognitive abilities and neglect other crucial success factors like emotional intelligence, persistence, and people skills. They think that because they can solve complex problems in their head, they should be able to figure out business, relationships, and life success the same way. But success in the real world is messy. It requires dealing with irrational people, managing emotions, building relationships, and persisting through multiple failures. These skills aren't taught in school, and they can't be figured out through pure reasoning. They have to be developed through experience, and that means being willing to be bad at something before you get good at it. This is where the smart person's ego becomes their biggest enemy. They're so used to being naturally good at things that when they encounter something that requires practice and gradual improvement, they give up too quickly. They'd rather retreat to areas where they already excel than endure the discomfort of being a beginner. Let me share something that changed my entire perspective on this. I used to think that success was about having the right strategy, the perfect plan, the most innovative idea. But after studying hundreds of successful people, I realized something profound. Success isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most persistent, the most adaptable, and the most willing to learn from failure. The most successful people I know have what I call intelligent ignorance. They're smart enough to recognize what they don't know, and humble enough to seek help, guidance, and feedback. They don't try to figure everything out themselves. They build teams of people who are smarter than them in specific areas. They ask questions that might make them look foolish in the short term, but help them succeed in the long term. Here's what you need to understand if you're smart but not yet successful. Your intelligence is not your limitation. How you're using your intelligence is. You need to shift from being a know-it-all to being a learn-it-all. You need to move from trying to be right to trying to be effective. You need to go from avoiding failure to leveraging failure as your competitive advantage. Start by embracing what I call strategic stupidity. This means intentionally putting yourself in situations where you're not the expert, where you have to learn and grow. Take on projects outside your comfort zone. Start that business even if you don't have all the answers. Have conversations with people who disagree with you. Make decisions with incomplete information and learn to adjust as you go. Next, develop action bias over analysis bias. Set a timer for your decision-making. Give yourself a specific amount of time to research and analyze, and when that time is up, make a decision and move forward. Remember, a good decision implemented quickly almost always beats a perfect decision implemented slowly. Also, start measuring yourself by different metrics. Instead of measuring yourself by how often you're right, measure yourself by how quickly you recover from being wrong. Instead of measuring yourself by how much you know, measure yourself by how fast you can learn new things. Instead of measuring yourself by avoiding failures, measure yourself by how much you extract from each failure. Finally, remember that success is not a solo sport. Your intelligence gives you the ability to synthesize information and see patterns that others might miss. Use that ability to help others succeed, and you'll find that success becomes much more achievable. The most successful people are not those who hoard their intelligence, but those who use their intelligence to create value for others. Intelligence is a tool, not a destination. How you choose to use that tool will determine whether it becomes your greatest asset or your biggest obstacle. Stop trying to think your way to success and start acting your way there. Your intelligence will still be there to help you course correct along the way, but only if you're brave enough to start moving in the first place. The question isn't whether you're smart enough to be successful. Indeed, you are. The question is whether you're willing to use your intelligence differently than you have been. Are you ready to transform your greatest strength into unstoppable momentum? If so, like, share, and subscribe for more mind-shifting and life-changing content.